Okay, you're ready to go.
Good evening and welcome. This is Secretary Angela Jameson calling to order the special meeting of the Inland Wetlands Commission on Monday, March the 13th, 2023. Chair Dan Stepanek is joining us via Zoom, as is Commission member Katie Owsley. Chair Stepanek has asked me to chair this meeting as I'm here physically in Town Hall. Could I have a nomination, please, for Chair Pro Tem for the evening?
Yes, I
Secretary
will.
Pro Tem. Secretary Pro Tem.
That we
Oh,
have to-
Chair. Oh, sorry, you're
we
doing
have-
Chair first.
yes.
I'm sorry.
Yes,
I'm
I'm
sorry.
going to nominate Angela Jameson as the Secretary Pro Tem.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
I'm working on my.
George
I second.
seconded.
Great.
Okay. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, that's carried unanimously. Now we need to nominate a secretary pro tem, and I nominate Beth Sanford.
Second.
All those in favor, please raise your hand. Carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Could I ask the secretary pro tem, please, to call the roll?
Okay. Is there a particular order I should?
You can do it in any order.
Any order.
Dan Stepanek,
Here.
Katie Owsley,
Katie is here.
He was.
I'm here.
Priscilla,
Here.
George Perkins,
Here.
Anthony Sillo,
Here.
Angela Jameson,
I'm here. Thank you.
Beth Sanford. I'm here.
Thank you, Beth.
And Beth Brunelli is absent.
Beth Brunelli is absent.
Okay, so now I'd like to seat an alternate for Commissioner Beth Brunelli, who is not present. Katie Owsley, please would you take her seat for this evening?
I will.
Thank you. You should all have seen and have in front of you the agenda for this evening's special meeting. Could I have an motion to approve the agenda, please? Priscilla Woike,
I'll second.
George Perkins seconded. All those in favor, raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye. Unanimously approved. So this evening's business is a special meeting to discuss and possibly vote on the following application. Application number 22-23-11-17 and 23 Hill Street 72 LLC. The application requests approval of regulated activities associated with a 93-unit residential community development, including site development preparation, construction and maintenance of building, accessory structure and associated driveways, parking areas and drainage measures in designated upland review area. The application also proposes to improve the substantially constructed and previously approved access driveway crossing area, including increasing the pervious surface of the access driveway from 16 to 20 feet and extending the existing retaining wall along the access driveway. So just a few opening remarks from me. This evening, we have a closed session of the Inland Wetlands Commission. Only commission members, the Director of Inland Wetlands, Kathleen Holland, and the Town Attorney, Pete Gelderman, who will be joining us shortly via Zoom, may speak. And the Commission has two decisions before it. Firstly, whether to grant a permit to the applicant for the proposed 93-unit multifamily property development, and two, the intervention that we received, which states that the proposed activities are reasonably likely to have the effect of unreasonably polluting and or impairing the air, water, or other resources of the state of Connecticut, or destroying the public trust in them. So, as ever in complex cases, we, the commission members, have the challenge of sifting through the conflicting testimony of three different sets of credentialed experts: the applicants, the interveners, and the third-party peer reviewers. So I just want to remind everyone on the commission that section 12.1 of the town's inland wetlands and watercourses regulations on page 30 lists the factors that we should consider. It's a very comprehensive list, but when decisions are challenged in court, courts have paid particular attention to a commission's reliance on the testimony of credentialed experts. And then section 12.2 of the regulations, which is also on page 30, if you want to take a look, set out the standards and criteria for the decisions we take. So I would like to propose that we start with a general discussion of what is being proposed, that we drill down into the details, and then we come back at a later stage to discuss how the two decisions we take may be interrelated or not. I'd suggest we just put that to one side for a moment and think about the application itself, its details, and how each of us are looking at that. So I'd just like to go around the table and ask each commission member how he or she is viewing the application and why. Would somebody like to go first?
George?
It's like school, nobody's going to volunteer. George Perkins for the record. I have reviewed as much as possible the information that we have. I think I have a fairly comprehensive view on what's going on. And I think that we can rely on the testimony of the experts from the applicants, the experts from the interveners, and the experts from our independent. And our judgment should be free of the political and social situation.
Thank you, George Perkins. Who would like to go next? Dan? Dan, I'm afraid we can't hear you. No.
He muted himself. It says mute in the left, lower left there.
Dan, afraid we still can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
We
Yes.
can, loud and clear. Thank you.
All right. Well, like George, I reviewed probably for the last couple of days all the documents. I quite frankly, my feeling going into this is the proposed dwelling had a lot of variables to it, and in order to do the right job on it, they had to really do a precise job, get everything perfect. I kind of looked at the driveway and the bridge, but after reviewing some of the experts that the applicant put before us, I've kind of changed my mind. Every one of the applicants, the 7, I believe that endorsed it, all said that it would be no problem that if everything worked well, that the driveway and the bridge would hold up under extreme construction traffic. Okay, so right now I am leaning towards approving this particular application with a number of special conditions. So, and I won't go into the conditions, but right now that's kind of where I am on this.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Stepanek. Who would like to speak next?
Beth Sanford for the record. I too went through the materials, all the recent materials, and kind of put it in 3 different piles. of, you can't hear me?
Speak up just a little bit or into the mic.
3 different piles of, what our peer review group had put together, which I placed a lot of emphasis on, what the applicant has presented as part of the application. And since many of the proposals have changed, I really focused on what's been proposed over the last 3 to 4 months in the paperwork, and then what the intervener had put together. And it's a very complicated project in a very small area that's kind of getting shoehorned there. And I'm looking forward to this discussion today, because I would say I haven't come to a conclusion, and I think we also need to be advised by our attorney about some of the issues. But as I looked at it, I saw 4 different parts of the proposal that had a lot of discussion about its possible impacts on the wetlands and watercourse. And one is the storm management system, which is a very complicated system that's going to require, if we were to approve this, a lot of supervision to make sure it works. And one of the things that came up, 2 parts of the storm management system, which is really comes down a lot to what the peak and volumes were, as I understand it, under different rain scenarios, all the way from 1 year to 100-year storms. One of the facts that came out of it, nobody disagreed, is that the volume is increased in the 1 year scenario. The experts said they don't think that will be an issue, or our experts did. But I think that's something to make sure that we feel comfortable that there's not an impact there, and that the estimates, which were described as conservative, are not conservative to the degree that they might hurt the wetlands ultimately. And so the one kind of thing I looked at was the storm management system, which I think is, not clear cut that is, in my eyes, that it's black and white, that's going to work. And if and the complexity of it it's going to have a lot of requirements in supervision. The other main issue I saw was the driveway, the retaining wall, and the bridge, which are all kind of one bucket as I describe it. But will the retaining wall maintain the structural integrity over time? And if it were to fail, it would have possible negative impact to the wetlands. So we have to feel comfortable that all the engineering around that is going to be solid. The third kind of category of activity that's really important for its potential impact on the wetlands, as I read through the papers, was what will be the effect of the rock crushing, where 31,000 square cubic yards of rock is going to be blasted. And, is there going to be any acid rock damage, and what's the effect of the dust on the wetlands? I came away from the reading from our experts that is not going to, I was fairly satisfied that is not going to be a reason for us to rule against the applicant. And the last category was the effect of snow removal. And we went through a lot in terms of how that's going to be done, what's going to happen to where the parking lot is, and where the snow is going to go. And not to go into all the details right now, but I came away also thinking that was fairly well covered and it would not be an objection. So it's the first 2 that I'm still kind of on the fence whether it's something that we should be concerned about. And one part of the comments which came from Michael Klein in his 224 report was talking about whether section 12.3 of the Inland Wetlands and Watercourse Regulation, and I don't know if this pertains to our decision tonight, Kathleen, and this is where Pete may guide us, says that the permit should not be issued unless the commission finds, based on the regulation, that a feasible and prudent alternative does not exist. And we are taking what was an approved 50,000 square feet of disturbance, which is now 90,000 square feet of disturbance, and a magnitude of the earthwork that's going to be a lot more than the original, proposal, which is a 75% increase if you were to do the math. And the question is, and this is in Michael Klein's words, we agree that the approved two lots of it subdivision is a feasible alternative, and that the area of disturbance and required tree and vegetation removal is substantially increased in the current proposal. The selection of the most prudent alternative is an issue for the commission's judgment, considering the potential adverse impacts weighed against the benefits. So that's what stumps me the most.
Thank you. Who would like to speak next?
I will.
Priscilla Woike, please. Thank you.
Yes, there was a lot of rereading to do. I mean, it's like we read it a long time ago and to reread it again today after all of the comments from the interveners and the applicant people. But I still think that the interveners had a lot of questions in a letter that was February 27th to us. That I'm not comfortable that all of them were answered completely. I think that we talk a lot about, where the pedestrians will walk and whatnot. We have to remember that we're really only concerned about the wetlands. We're not concerned about who's walking where and so forth. So we have to keep that in mind as well. And I go back and forth. One day I'm reading all of the pros from this, of accepting it. I'll look and think and read some other things, and I'm still not convinced one way or the other. So maybe our discussions and everybody else's comments tonight will be helpful to all of us too.
Sure.
Kathleen Holland for the record. Priscilla, the 227 report, who is the author of that report? If I could just write that down.
February 27th?
Yeah.
It's from the SE Minor Company and it's signed by Robert Sundalo.
Thank you.
For the record, Angela Jameson. Priscilla, thank you so much for your comments. You started off by saying there was a lot of rereading to do, and that's certainly the case. Could I ask you just to confirm that you did review all the documents that have been submitted as part of it? That is something that all of us as commission members should do, if it's provided that is absolutely the case. And I believe we have those confirmations from everyone who's spoken thus far.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. So we have three more people to speak, Anthony and Katie, and then I'll go at the end.
I'll go again. I've reviewed all the documents over the course of the last week. Everything that I was going to say has been pretty much said. We got a lot of information from many experts on either side, and including our third-party experts that we mandated to bring in, or I guess mandated is the right, mandated to bring in. Again, I think we got a lot of information from a lot of different, people that have been in this business a long time. To your point, I think there has been a lot of, this is a very big system that we're looking at, and there's a lot of water and there's a lot of different attributes that go into it. And I think that's why we spent so much time on the stormwater management system. I believe, and one of the biggest things for me was spending time on the stormwater management system, which I know that took a lot of time to explain. But at the end of the day, those systems, we're relying on those systems to not affect the wetlands. I agree with Priscilla when we talk about, there are, you know, and again, there are codes and other things that we talked about last meeting with Maria Hoplet, that are more engineering and P and Z policies. There's also things that we talked about, excuse me, with the bridge, pedestrian walk, which again, to Priscilla's point, there will be, you know, we need to look at what affects the wetlands. So with that being said, I think I'm interested in having a conversation, you know, I think we have a lot of information on everything. So I think not quick conversations, but, you know, concise conversations talking about how we're going to move on this thing either way. I will say that DeAndrea did do a very, you know, did a very good job at answering the questions and designing a very intricate system. And that's not easy to do. And I know that, you know, me just seeing a lot of these plans, this is not an easy feat to do. So I commend them on that. That's pretty much it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sillo. Ms. Owsley, would you like to tell us how you're looking at this?
Yes, I'm first confirming that I've reviewed the documents. And as Anthony was saying, a lot of people have brought up issues that are particular ones that I'm concerned about. I think the three areas that that maybe haven't been mentioned, the snow removal, I think Beth said she was content with where it was. I agree that they address the additives that they would use in an adequate manner. I'm still unclear or unsure that there is sufficient space for the a snow removal process. So that was a concern. Another concern I had that we really never talked about in these sessions is I participated in a river cleanup at the 5 mile right at the intersection of 123 and Hill Street, maybe 2-3 years ago. Hundreds of pounds of litter. I'm thinking about how polluted it was, and then how polluted it might be with the introduction of another several hundred people right in that area. That's something we really never talked about, the impact on that particular river of the increased number of the increased population. And then my last concern, and I understand, I guess I'm struggling a little bit with this and understand that we need to rule on the application in front of us now. I'm very concerned about getting into a situation where we've sort of been gamed backwards, whereby, you know, maybe we approve this with significant considerations, and again, P&Z approves and it gets built, and then at some point it comes back to us and this said, okay, you know what, now we've discovered we have to widen that driveway because more emergency vehicles need to get in and out. And then we're at that point, our hand is really forced to impact the wetlands because it's a safety issue. So again, I know that's we are looking at the application as it stands in front of us now, but I'm concerned somewhat about this process and would love some advice on the legal fronts on that. I did think that the scientist for the applicant was very compelling and answered a lot of my questions about the water and the runoff and where it would go. And I didn't feel as though the interveners scientists really provided any evidence that there would be lasting and impactful changes made to the or they didn't specify specifics, which I think is really part of the charter. So that's where I stand. Undecided as most.
Okay, thank you so much, Katie. For the record, this is Angela Jameson. And so, you know, my starting point is that the proposed regulated activity is part of a highly complex engineering project with many phases and layers that will require major excavation and construction in a very small parcel of land, including in the upland review area and close to the wetland boundaries. Typically, this commission has not provided permits for proposed regulated activities so close to the wetlands themselves. And this really is a good deal of activity, utilizing significant heavy equipment, requiring the transportation of potentially polluting materials from the site, and over a very extended period of time. I mean, all aspects of the engineering plan have to perform perfectly for there not to be substantial adverse impacts to the wetlands and the surrounding areas here, in my opinion. And, you know, having weighed the testimony of the various experts, we all know that in reality, complex engineering projects end up as being very messy, with various aspects not going according to plan and unforeseen problems arising. There's always a big difference between the concept and the reality. And once the construction, so I am concerned about the construction period, but I'm also concerned that once the development is there, 93 units, 93 households, the ordinary daily activities of the residents that live there and their visitors, as well as the necessary maintenance of this extensive developments, going to impact the surrounding footprint of the property, including the wetlands. And Dan Stepanek and I are the only two members of the commission, I believe, who were on the commission when earlier decisions were made about this parcel of land. And I'd just like to spend a few minutes talking about the history here. I mean, you're all familiar with the expression of death by 1,000 paper cuts, and the totality of applications and permits that we've seen here add up to what could be the erosion of the wetlands, you know, one incremental step at a time. One modification after the other, you know, adds up to significant enlargement of the activities that are being undertaken in regulated areas. And then I just want to say a few words about my opinion, and it is my opinion, nobody else's, of the credibility of the applicant's narrative. The narrative that's been presented to this commission through the applications since 2014 has really shifted. The original 2014 application was on behalf of the estate of the property owner so that they could more easily sell the land. And the commission spent hours considering whether there were alternative ways to enter and leave the property that did not cross the wetlands or would impact the wetlands less than the proposed driveway. Eventually, the commission concluded, rightly or wrongly, that the right of the property owner to access the property outweighed the adverse impact on the wetland caused by constructing the, at that time, 12-foot wide driveway. So shortly after we granted that permit, the property was sold. And then there were various applications made in 2016, 2017, and 2018 from the new owners, Hill Street 72 LLC. And those applications included one that finally resulted in a permit. And through significant doubt and shade on the original driveway proposal that the Inland Wetlands Commission had approved, the new proposal would, we were told, widen the driveway from 12 foot to 16 feet, but result in a less adverse impact to the wetlands by reducing the square footage of wetlands impacted. And we were assured that 2 single-family homes, and only 2 single-family homes, were in prospect. Mr. Karp personally assured us, as we were reminded by the video that was submitted by the interveners, that only 2 single-family homes were planned and that the driveway wasn't a road. We now find out through material that was submitted as part of the record that as early in 2017, Hill Street 72 LLC had paid for an engineering report by GZA into the feasibility of a retaining wall for a multifamily development that looks suspiciously similar to what we're looking at right now. I mean, Mr. Stone assured us on the March 1st that this study was only conceptual. But the fact that it wasn't even mentioned as a potential or conceptual possibility in 2017 or 2018 sits uneasily with me in terms of being certain that the Inland Wetland Commission has been provided with a full picture of what's really intended here and how the LLC's contractors intend to do it. You know, what else might there be that is conceptual at this stage, I ask myself. And we also know that there was a violation of the existing permit earlier this year, which was mitigated following a cease and desist order. But really, a professional operation such as those involved with 72 Hill Street LLC should have known that what they were doing was indeed a violation and therefore come back to the commission to ask for a permit to do it. In my opinion, and it is only my opinion, the applicant has a track record of being at very best, very economical with the truth. This tendency undermines the credibility of the applicant's narrative, in my view, but not the testimony of the highly credentialed experts that he has that have been hired to provide evidence for us to look at. Nonetheless, the burden of proof rests with the applicant to show that the regulated activities will not adversely impact the wetlands. And I'm not convinced at this point in time that the applicant has reached that high bar, despite the additional information that has been provided and the revisions that have been made to the original plans. Two sets of experts continue to have significant concerns regarding the plans. So Robert Sandolo of SE Minor concluded on the 27th of February that the applicant had failed to address all concerns and that significant deficiencies and open items remained. The application lacks, he stated, the level of detail and analysis warranted by a project of this magnitude. It's not possible to determine whether the proposed development is feasible, nor to determine the full extent of adverse impacts to the wetlands. And here I'm quoting directly, given the material provided, it is our opinion that the proposed development will have an adverse impact on the wetland and upland areas and will pose risk to the general safety of the public. And there were a number of things that I was particularly mindful of in the testimony that he provided. The proposed development, as has already been noted by other commission members, will increase peak flows in the one-year storm event by 0.11 cubic feet per second or 49 gallons per minute. This increase is not negligible, he concluded, and will increase sedimentation and erosion while exacerbating existing flooding. The proposed development will increase runoff volumes in the one-year storm event by nearly 3,000 cubic feet. That is 22,434 gallons. And as his testimony pointed out, if a wetland is inundated with more water than it is accustomed to, this is just as detrimental as a lack of water. There are also significant increases in runoff volumes in the 1, 2, 5, 10 and 25-year design storms. And these are all relatively common occurring storm events. And these conclusions were supported by more detailed analysis in his report of the 19th of February of this year. Mr. Sandolo did agree that the groundwater discharge from the rock cut is relatively clean and the peak flow associated with it is negligible. And that was something that was put forward in the expert testimony of the applicant. But he concluded that it was reasonably likely that there will still be adverse impacts to the wetlands as a result of the clean water being polluted while being conveyed through the proposed stormwater network and discharging into the wetlands. He pointed out that once catch basins and piping are in place, these will trap pollutants that will be picked up by the water. And in relation to the retaining wall, Mr. Sandolo concluded that the applicant had failed to address concerns regarding its structural integrity and its relationship with the proposed infiltration of runoff directly behind it. He stated that in our professional opinion, the proposed design of having a mortared stone wall with a dry laid stone footing is very unusual and not structurally sound. Failure of the wall would result in discharge of polluted runoff into the wetlands and uplands area, or even worse, a structural failure of the wall itself. And he went on to question the efficacy and practicality of the proposed snow removal and management plan, which eliminates 15 parking spaces and turnaround spaces. And if spaces are occupied by cars when there's snowfall, that snow would have to be stockpiled in vegetated areas, and untreated snow melt would run off into the wetlands. Mr. Canis of Tighe & Bond asked a lot of very detailed questions about the project, and the applicants, experts provided a lot of detailed answers. But I put particular weight on his final report dated the 27th of February. He noted that there are still areas where additional information is needed to satisfy his concerns. And he noted that the project is a large undertaking in a limited area on steep slopes to wetlands. This kind of scale of project will require close monitoring and a capable contractor who understands the challenges of building on steep sites and the sensitivity of surrounding wetlands. I'm glad he raised this issue, and I question whether we can be certain that this will be the case. He also asked for more information in relation to stormwater management. His comment on the location of certain stormwater system elements, such as the riprap apron, scour hole, and level spreader at the bottom of the proposed western retaining walls, remains outstanding, I believe. He raised concerns about how these elements would be accessed for maintenance. Access for larger maintenance activities via ladder over the wall, he said, would be difficult. And he expressed concern that groundwater passing through the ungrouted base of the retaining wall will short circuit the water quality volume treatment that would be achieved by infiltration. More information was needed, he said, in relation to certain aspects of the retention system, as well as hydraulic computations to the proposed storm drains. He questioned how the area for snow storage was determined. And then he also wanted to know whether the proposed modified riprap in relation to the proposed swale at the top of the rock cut was sufficient to withstand the shear stresses that will be generated by the velocities on the steeper runs. And at the meeting of the 23rd of February, Mr. Canis recommended that should the Inland Wetlands Commission approve the application, there should be a robust bonding measure, as it is a complex project and there are many things that might not function as planned. He said his most significant concern is whether the capacity of the storage in the detention system is sufficient in larger storms. The fact that we need to consider robust bonding implies, in my view, a real risk that this complex engineering and construction plan will not turn out as planned, with serious adverse consequences for the wetlands. Michael Klein of Davison Environmental had many comments, many questions. And I won't go into great detail about those right now, but I can later if it becomes relevant. And in his report of the 1st of March, which was the last one he submitted to us, Mr. Klein raised the challenge for the Commission of having to decide if the cumulative effect of numerous plan changes is great enough to result in a new plan, which the Commission, the public, and the interveners have not had the opportunity to review. So there was a lot of really excellent material provided by the applicant and their experts. I mean, if you were just to kind of make the decision based upon the weight, the volume of the testimony provided, you know, obviously, you know, the vote would be to approve the application, but that's not what we're here to do tonight. So I must say I have very severe reservations about what is proposed here, and I am coming to the conclusion that it will adversely impact the wetlands based upon the testimony that we have heard from a number of the well-credentialed experts in this application. So I apologize for the length of my comments. So I think everybody has expressed their overall thoughts at this stage. I must say, I thought that Commissioner Sanford's suggestion of dividing this into 4 buckets made a lot of sense. And I would suggest that we perhaps go through each of those buckets in some detail. The first one was the stormwater management system. So how is people thinking about this in detail?
George Perkins for the record. And looking at the stormwater detail, it is very comprehensive. And I really question my qualifications to pass on that. And I'm wondering if this is something for the town engineers or planning and zoning, or for whatever it might fall into. It seems to be very comprehensive. I went through it. But I don't have the technical knowledge to really pass judgment on it, but I will. My preview is that we should really be focusing on things that really affect the wetlands and not construction or traffic or pedestrians. So that's where I am on it right now.
How are other people thinking about the stormwater management system? Do they have concerns, or are they kind of very comfortable with how it's been laid out for us by the applicants' experts?
So Anthony Sillo here, just as George said, again, it's a very complex system, but I feel like, one, I think that the town engineers and the town engineering department basically has certain, like we've spoke about in previous meetings, has certain policies that need to be upheld. I don't think that, as for our end, our experts that we brought in said that there would not be an adverse impact from the stormwater retention system, but like we brought up before, there will be some sort of an impact, just not in our experts' minds severe, right? So I think that I also have a little bit of reservation with Angela as well. This is like where I'm split, where again, it was a very thought out, planned system, which I think handles everything. But to speak to Angela's point, it's designed up to a 25-year storm. And we know that in the past few years, we've had storms, significantly bigger storms than a 25-year storm. So why we spent so much time, or I tried to spend a little bit of time getting these guys to explain to us, or the applicant to explain to us why, or how it all works. I do have a small reservation on making sure that this system will be able to handle, and it's designed to handle a 25-year storm, but we don't know if there's bigger storms down the line. We'll never be able to figure it out till they come, I guess. But I guess I would like to see what would happen in a 50-year event. I think that's your point, Angela, or a 100-year event, which we've had, within a couple recent years. So that's just kind of where I am without the water retention system. But I do feel like, again, it is a very large system for the site. I think it's comprehensive for this 25-year event. And again, I think Deandra did a great job with it. I just think that it's for a 25-year event, right? So that's where I'm at.
George
Yeah,
Perkins.
actually, this is Dan. I'm kind of in George's ballpark. I don't know enough about it, but I think that the runoff personally from the construction site, any debris or anything running down that hill it could be a bigger issue than the stormwater. And of course, I know I'm going back to the driveway and the bridge. I in the back of my mind, and it's just nothing but just like you said, Angela, everything's got to go right in this project, okay? If it doesn't, if one thing goes wrong, it's going to be like a snowball running down a hill. You just there's too many variables here, and that's why I go back to the bridge, and I know that I shouldn't because they say that's already been taken care of, but I just have a feeling that a truck's going to go off that road and into the wetlands, or drop some debris or in the wetlands, or some way cause an adverse impact on the wetlands. And that's kind of where I zeroed in on. So I'm kind of like George. I kind of felt they did a pretty good job, and the what do I want to say, the town engineer, I didn't get the feeling that, even though there would be an overflow, she wasn't concerned about that, or the town's not concerned about that. So, if the town's not concerned about it, I wanted to put my thoughts in other areas.
This is George Perkins for the record. One of the reasons I joined the Wetlands Commission, talked to Kathy about it years ago, was that our house is situated at the bottom of a waterway, and that waterway collects all the water from 123 and Old Kings Highway, and it comes down through a hill, and right at the edge of my property, it goes into a well, and then down through the property, and then eventually winds up at 5 Mile River. Well, during one of the storms that we had, and I think it was a 100-year storm, maybe 10 years ago, but time flies, we had tremendous damage. Everything was rushed down. So I've seen the effects of not having proper storm management. And it just has to be done right, because if it's not, particularly with that location and the number of houses down below it, I think it could be devastating.
For the record, this is Angela Jameson. So engineering is a science. It's evolved, it's changed, it's got better, but things still happen. Things go awry. There are unintended consequences, and things get broken, as Mr. Perkins just pointed out. And clearly we have had 3 sets of very credentialed engineers, but engineers always think that every problem, there's an engineering solution to it. And we may not be engineering experts, but we've all encountered situations where that hasn't been the case. And I just go back to what those wetlands will look like in, 5 years time, after this construction has taken place. And I am very concerned about the construction itself, because that's a really major excavation. There's a lot of rock and dirt that has to be blasted out of that parcel of land, and has to be taken away from the site. And all that has to be done in a way that doesn't impact the wetlands. I just have questions about whether that really can be the case in reality.
Just speaking from Anthony Silva for the record, and I know that I'm seeing this from a couple different sides, and I think Angela makes good points. Unfortunately, I hate to like use construction is construction, right? Things are going to happen. At the same token, I feel like if we didn't let construction take place, and again, this is my sole opinion, just being in the field, you sit there and say, yes, some things do happen. We can't, unfortunately, we can't predict a truck going off the driveway. We can't predict that we're going to get a 100-year storm. We can't predict all these things. But I think this is why, to Angela's point and our experts' point, bonding or watchdog or some sort of regulatory entity should be checking up on these things. If let's say this does get approved, we may need to put in certain things that say, hey, once a week while they're doing the blasting and the crushing, they need to go out there and make sure the silt fence is the way it's supposed to be and upright and working. Maybe we have to have a couple layers just to make sure, right? And maybe we need to hire someone to do that, right? Because I do think it's also hard, Angela, to say construction is not perfect, right? And everyone knows that, but we do as much as we can to protect the wetlands that we're trying to protect. It's just it's hard to, in my opinion, to predict the future, right? So I think that sometimes, both sides, obviously, and both parties and engineers and experts have given us their opinion, but if like Angela also said, engineers have there's a calculation. We may need to put something in place to also reassure the public and ourselves that this is going to protect the wetlands.
Andrew or Anthony, I think whatever that would be an excellent idea if we could come up with something. I don't know, it's something we should toy with a little bit and bounce around, but I really do feel sorry for the residents that surround this piece of property. That could happen. So I like that idea. I'm not sure what it would be, but that's something we might want to discuss.
Beth Sanford, for the record, one of the quotes that popped out to me, and it was quoted in Michael Klein's February 24th write-up, but he's quoting Etsy Minor. And I think in terms of what Angela said is, this is a really complicated, intricate proposal of how to manage the stormwater system. And what was written in that document was the following: given the area, the size of the development, and the scope of the application, the failure of the stormwater network will have significant adverse impact to the health, safety, and surrounding environment, including the wetland upland area and the wetlands itself. We agree with respect to the downstream wetlands and watercourses. The approaches utilized to develop the proposed stormwater network is conceptually sound according to the information and calculations provided. And so this is an expert saying it's sound because they've put a very intricate, system together, but the what ifs are not really their job of things going awry or not being done according to the schedule. So that gives me pause.
And this is Angela Jameson. I believe, Miss Sanford, that you're actually quoting from page 10 and 11.
Well, I've kind of combined my documents.
Oh, okay.
But but
That's where I see that.
Right,
yes.
right, yes.
The letter or the report of 24th of February.
Yeah, sorry, I went and cut and paste so I could have it all together.
I'm sure that made it a lot easier to drill down and draw conclusions.
Easy might not be the right word, but
I want to make sure that Commissioner Owsley isn't being ignored because I don't see her hand up, but is there anything you wanted to add at this point?
I think I'm sort of in line with other people and wrestling as Beth so aptly put it with the what ifs. Yes, so just mulling over here.
I think we should also point out too, that we did talk about, or Maria briefly in the last meeting spoke about, and I would never try to put words in Maria's mouth, but she said she's not going to tell the applicant how to design their system. And I think she said something to that effect. I don't, and again, I am not an engineer. I'm a local builder. I hire engineers to do this type of stuff, but she did mention something like that. And that kind of caught my curiosity a little bit. Is there a reason that again, I don't know if this is a big deal of it, but is there a reason why it's set to a 25-year event? Or I think did we mention anything, Angela, about it being a regulation that it had to be a 25-year event?
You know, that's not my area of expertise. Maybe Miss Holland.
Again,
wants
maybe
to
something
chime in.
for Maria. I mean, again, I don't know, and I don't know.
Actually, I have Maria's report. So let me just see here.
Well, here's the person who's really organized.
Not really. Hold on, let me just look at that. I am looking at Maria Coplit's memo, initially dated October 27th and revised February 27th, 2023. This was entered into the record prior to the February 27th meeting. So we did all receive this. I'd have to reread the memo, but I could probably find pretty quickly.
Again, it may be an engineering question.
Yeah,
I don't know if that
I
really
think she
pertains
would
to
have
us.
called out if they had not
I
been
agree.
following the policy as in place. It didn't seem to be called out that they weren't following the policy as in
Yeah.
place. The only issue was the small amount of increase in the volume.
For the record, this is Angela Jameson, and I just want to go back to Mr. Sillo's comments about construction is construction. It is. It absolutely is. And that, you know, you can't cover all the what ifs. But it's for that reason that when we have considered applications that build in the upland review area and very close to the wetlands, we've kind of pushed back and said, well, you know, really, does this patio have to go out this, you know, another 2 feet so close to the wetland lines? Because we all know what can happen during construction. And I mean, I've just looked at a number of these maps time and time again, and I think you can look at any of them that show the wetland lines and the upland review area. I just happen to be looking at the ones that are dated the 15th of February 2023. And you know, actually that's not that one doesn't show the development, but this one does. And you can see the wetland line and you can see the upland review area. And, you know, there's development in that upland review area that gets really quite close to the wetland lines, and not just in one area. It's not just one little corner of this building that sticks out well into the upland review area close to the wetlands themselves. I mean, it seems to me this is more extensive development in the upland review area and close to the wetlands line than we typically feel comfortable with.
You know, this is Dan. You know, and there's 7 or 8 experts that said that the application would not cause any adverse effects to the wetlands. But each one, when they answered that, said if everything is followed precisely, I will say there will be no adverse impact to the wetlands. I mean, just think about that. That they all qualified it, okay? So it seems to me that they know something. It isn't going to happen. And what you said, Anthony, you know, it's construction, there's mistakes all the time. Not purposeful mistakes, but just, you know, people mistakes. And I don't see how this plan can be followed 100% according to it. And that's where I think we need some, if we're going to approve it, where the reason we need some very, I want, in some ways, radical special conditions for this. So, and we all know that looking at this, that there's probably going to be mistakes, and there's going to be some problems, there's going to be some hiccups. Yeah.
This is Angela Jameson for the record. I would just like to go back to the driveway for a minute because,
Priscilla.
Priscilla, I'm
did you-
so sorry.
Oh, okay,
Go
sorry.
ahead, and then I'll go after you. I have a question.
Oh,
Sorry about
okay.
that. She-
No. So I'd just like to talk about the driveway and what's proposed. We provided a permit for them to cross the wetlands and build a driveway to 2 conceptual single-family homes. Now, in my own mind, I've dubbed it the driveway to nowhere, because we didn't take into account any of the construction because nothing was being proposed. All that was being proposed was initially a 12-foot driveway with turnouts so that vehicles could pass. And then that was extended because we were persuaded that the 16-foot wide driveway was actually less harmful to the wetlands than the 12-foot driveway. But with that 16-foot driveway, there were going to be portions between the impervious pavement where vehicles would drive and the actual edge of the driveway. Whereas what we're now talking about is a 20-foot impervious pavement or pavement area, which vehicles will be occupying. And, you know, to Dan Stepanik's earlier point, the vehicles will actually be closer to the edge of the wetlands than they would be if there was this sort of, if you like to call it a border or whatever, of 2 feet either side of the driveway. And that does give me a little bit of pause for thought, or at least I think it's something that we should discuss, whether we're comfortable with that that extension in width of the drivable area.
My problem is it's not my problem. I mean, it's done,
Mhm.
right? And that's, I think that's sort of the issue that we really can't, I don't know if we could discuss it very long because it's there, right? And to your point, Angela, it's constructed or approved under false pretenses, but now it's there, and I'm not sure how we can go either retract it or go through with or making it bigger. I find it to be a very, to your point, it's kind of a conundrum. Like what are we, like, it's there, it's currently functioning. If we make it bigger, is it going to function again? I will say, the presentation that was given with the absorption of the water going down, doing all that, like the porous concrete, asphalt and all that was, again, impressive. I just feel like I wasn't on the commission when this was all approved the first time, and I'm not sure if we can not retract. I don't want to say retract, but how we can discuss it, I guess, is that.
George Perkins for the record. And I think this is a question for our lawyer. Once the driveway has been built, it's already in. Does this become a planning and zoning Or does it fall back to the effect that it has on the wetlands?
For the record, Pete Gelderman, well, the fact is it's been approved by your commission, so it's not really a wetland issue at this point in time. Planning and zoning will consider, the entire plan. The impact of that driveway on the wetlands is not going to be something that the Planning and Zoning Commission is necessarily going to consider, but the reality is that the commission, your commission, approved what's there. So I understand Angela and Dan's concerns about what was said at the time, but at this point in time, the design that's there was approved. If they want to widen the driveway by another couple of feet at some point in time, they will have to come back to your commission to get an approval of that.
And like we spoke about last meeting, I guess, when they said the conceptual, they were maybe thinking about doing a conceptual second driveway. That would also have to come back to us as well, correct?
Correct.
Yes, if it is within a regulated area, or if there's going to be an impact, a negative adverse impact on the wetlands from that. They haven't actually proposed that.
No, but they put it in their
They did. They showed it as where it would go where they think it would go if it was ever required to be located there. But for right now, it's not a proposed change to their plan. So, but yes, if that particular driveway were ever proposed, it would have to come to you. It crosses a wetland.
Priscilla
Yeah, a couple
Wojcicki,
of-
please.
We did approve the 20-foot driveway a couple of years ago.
Well, the base of it, yes, but the 16-foot paved is what the previous approval was for. Now it will be 20-foot paved. So it's not getting.
So to Angela's point, there was
Yeah.
a buffer.
Yeah.
There was, I'm calling it a buffer. There was a gravel buffer. And then there was pavement.
Yeah.
And now they're saying they want to pave over the complete thing, but have porous asphalt drop down water
Mm.
in underneath the bridge, which then flows underneath the bridge. That mean flowed through the bridge to go underneath the
Into the
bridge. Yeah.
culvert, right?
No, even they, as I saw it being described, not just the culvert, but also underneath, like the water would flow underneath the current foundation of it, I guess.
Angela Jameson, for the record. I mean, this discussion just brings me back to the fact that things keep changing incrementally, in the planning for this particular parcel of land. It's two single family homes. It's a 12-foot driveway. Oh, no, it isn't. It's 16 foot, and that's better for these reasons. And we agreed to that. And so it kind of goes on and on and on, and it builds, and cumulatively, more and more, it seems to me, the wetlands are touched upon.
I guess the only thing I would say, Kathleen Holland, for the record, there's no limit on applicants being able to apply for wetlands applications for any location. So just,
Yep.
I know you know that. But-
Angela James for the record. Yes, that's absolutely true. And thank you for pointing that out. But nonetheless, the impact of application after application after application, is X plus Y plus Z plus blah, 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 blah,
Well, yeah, and that's where you need to figure out whether
Yeah.
you have an adverse impact
Right.
for this particular application.
So maybe we should just stick for a couple of minutes on the proposal to extend the actual paved part of the driveway from 16 feet to 20 feet, and whether we think there's a significant issue there of, adverse impact to the wetlands, or whether it's something that actually isn't of huge consequence.
If this is Pete Gelderman, if I can just chime in real quickly. The answer to that question, yes or no, needs to be supported by substantial evidence in the record, which would be expert testimony. So that's not something that the commission can determine without some expert testimony supporting that finding. I'm not saying what you should find or not find, but whatever it is, it needs to be supported by expert testimony.
I think Attorney Gelderman, I think this is where we're having a problem with our experts is, and they mentioned it in the previous meeting and saying, we got to and again, I don't know the timeline of everything, but two of our experts said they barely had enough time to get through all the paperwork to look at that. So I'm hoping that by them looking at it as well as they did, and they said there was no adverse impact. I mean, we do have to, because it's in the record, right, Kathleen? I mean, it's in the record that there will be, in their professional opinion, there will be no adverse impact, right? But again, it should be noted that they didn't think that they had a ton of time either to really sink their teeth into it. But I mean, their word here is there wouldn't be one.
Right. And I believe each one did confirm that they were able to review the full record.
Yeah, I think they reviewed it, but I just feel like they did mention that they did get it kind of.
Frustrated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, I think it goes down to, let's say that this is approved. I mean, to Dan's point again, I think we keep on going back to this. With this complicated, there needs to be someone there, right? Especially re-excavating the current driveway that they're going to do with all this whole system that they're going to do and all these things that they say they're going to do. If there's someone there, and again, to use Dan's word, like a very radical, like a very stringent, you know, consideration and adhering to like a regulation on site. That's the only way this commission really can say, hey, you know, we did our best to protect the wetlands here, right? And that is to follow that plan to a T.
Right,
You know,
and that's an appropriate.
If ands or buts about it.
Yeah, yes, and that's an appropriate condition. If the commission determines it wants to approve the application, that would be an appropriate condition of approval. You have the right to monitor the activities to ensure that everything is being followed to the, you know, to the T.
So I guess my other question would be, is there a repercussion? I don't want to use the word consequence, but is there something that we can say, like if it's not, or if it's arrogantly disregarded, or if something happened and it's in the plan and it didn't happen that way, and we're calling them quote unquote watchdog says they didn't do it this way. Is there some sort of repercussion that we can put in place to say, hey, are we going to stop work till we figure it out? Are we going to hire a different excavation company? Like, do we have any say in that?
Yes.
Yes,
Already
yeah.
built.
I figure.
Yeah.
I'm just.
It's self-correcting. It's already in the regulations. Enforcement action. There's different levels of enforcement that would take place. So
Yeah.
I think that's correct, Pete, is that it's already within our regulations and we
Right.
have full scope to proceed down a violation route should a violation occur, as I have done at the other.
Correct. Correct. Right up to a cease and desist. You can order work stopped at that point in time if there's a violation. So there's teeth in that. It's not just words on a resolution. So there are teeth behind that.
Great. Thank you.
This is Angela Jameson. I believe Katie Owsley has had her hand up by a video for some while. I apologize for the fact that I didn't notice.
She's on.
No rush at all. I had two questions. My first, I think, was just answered, and I was wondering about the consequences of not complying with any regulations or conditions that we put on it, and I remain concerned that those need to be a deterrent. I guess I'm thinking back to what Dan said earlier, which was, you know, Dan, you I think expressed some ease with about this idea of placing these constraints around it. I guess my question is, we're dancing around a little bit of saying, okay, it seems that the sort of meticulous way in which this storm management system was laid out, I think we all agree it was incredibly thoughtful. And if it works 100% as expected, that it would be fine. And then I think we all also said, but if it doesn't, there may be adverse impacts to the wetlands, given how close it is to the wetlands. And Dan, I think that at that point you said that this would be a good stopgap, is putting these conditions on it. But I guess my question is, at that point, isn't that enough for us to say, no, there's too great a chance of anything going wrong and derailing this? And because of the incredible proximity to the wetlands, any move off of the set plan will result in detriment to the wetlands.
But
At that point,
Katie, I think, and Peter, back me up on this. We can't project the future, and we don't know for sure this would happen, and we can't go that route, can we, Peter?
Speculation is not an appropriate consideration for the commission. So now, if an expert said to you, this system will fail, and I'm certain it will in a 50-year storm or 25-year storm or whatever storm they're using, if you had expert testimony in the record that said that this stormwater management system is not sufficient and it will fail and it will have an adverse impact on the wetlands, then that's sufficient evidence. But speculating about the possibility without an expert supporting that speculation with specific evidence, you have to look at, you have to find expert testimony. By the way, let me back up a second. Substantial evidence is generally defined as expert testimony. So, and as Angela pointed out, it's not who had the most experts. It's because the commission is the finder of fact. But whatever decision the commission makes with respect to this application needs to be supported by substantial evidence in the record. So if the commission said, well, we're going to deny this because it might fail, then there should be substantial evidence to support that. There should be something in the record from an expert that says this is going to fail, and therefore, that you shouldn't approve it. So, but speculation of what might happen in the future without that support of an expert is dangerous territory. Keep in mind that, when I advise the commission on things like this, I am not in any way, shape, or form telling a commission how they should make a decision. I will defend whatever decision the commission makes if there's an appeal from that decision. So, one of my goals is to make that decision as solid as possible when it comes up for judicial review. And in this case, it's certainly likely that regardless of what decision the commission makes, somebody is going to take an appeal, whether it's the applicant. If you deny it, it may be a neighbor. If it's approved, but it's likely that there will be an appeal. So my goal is to try to give the commission as much ammunition as possible so that whatever decision you make, it's supported by substantial evidence in the record, because that is the standard that a judge is going to look at. And a judge will say speculation is not enough. There has to be something in the record to establish that substantial impact. So,
and just to clarify, I don't think I'm articulating this very well as I'm thinking through this. I'm not speculating about a specific event. What I'm saying is that the combined margin of error for all of these issues, that tiny margin of error that we're looking at, combined with the extreme proximity to the wetlands, and I think there is evidence of both of those things in the testimony, is that a reason to say no to this?
again, I'm not going to tell the commission how to vote. Is it a valid reason? If you find support in the record for that finding that this activity will have an adverse impact on wetlands or watercourses. So that's what you need to look at. To say, well, it's close to the wetlands and, you know, there's a bunch of things that could go wrong. You know, I don't know if that's a basis without specific identifiable adverse impacts to the wetlands, which is really the standard that you're looking at. You may be able to find those in the record, and that's why, you know, again, you may have 5 experts who say, no, that's not going to be a problem. You may have other experts who say, yeah, that is a problem. Then it's up to the commission to determine, you know, is our decision supported by that substantial evidence? And it may be that one expert you decide is telling you the proper, you know, you agree with that expert's conclusion over other expert conclusions. So that's where it becomes a little bit difficult for the commission as lay people to say, well, how are we supposed to figure out which expert is, you know, well, that's the administrative process. That's in fact one of the things you have to do, and make your decision based on whatever you have in the record that supports the decision you want to come to. There are 7 of you. 3 of you may believe one set of experts. 3 of you may believe another set. 1 of you may say, I don't really know. You know, then you've got a problem when it comes to voting. But each person is going to come to their own conclusion. And then at the end, hopefully there's a majority who vote. That becomes the collective statement by the commission of your decision. So among yourselves, you may have a disagreement about what evidence you consider to be substantial and what the impact on the wetlands is going to be. My only hope is that whatever decision you make, you can find expert testimony in the record to support that. That's what I'm trying to get to. And as long as I'm speaking, I'll get into one other subject really quickly, and that's the old feasible and prudent alternative issue. And that's, first of all, you only get into feasible and prudent alternatives if you find there's an adverse impact on the wetlands. So if you make a determination that based on expert testimony, there's no adverse impact to the wetlands, there's no need to consider feasible and prudent alternatives. Feasible and prudent alternatives can be suggested by the commission to the applicant. And if the commission believes there are first of all, if the commission finds there's an adverse impact and the commission feels there's a feasible and prudent alternative, then the commission can make a recommendation to the applicant to consider those feasible and prudent alternatives. So that I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but I'm just saying that because at this point in time, as you consider all this stuff, that might, you know, enter into your thinking down, you know, when you make that decision. But again, first, there has to be a finding of an adverse impact. Then if there is a feasible and prudent alternative, then the application should be denied. And we can get into what a feasible and prudent alternative is to some extent. I would also say to the commission that while Attorney Smith, Chris Smith, in his wrap-up comments, he's advocating on behalf of a client, but so his conclusions are his own conclusions, but he did offer a fairly accurate assessment of the standards that the courts look at in wetland applications. So what he said about, he cited some cases, and what he said about that was actually an accurate statement of the law and how the courts apply the law to wetland appeals. But you know, that's not to say that you know, the next step, the conclusion that you have to approve this is accurate. That's up to you. That's the commission's decision. But he did give a pretty good summary of what the law is with respect to considerations on wetland applications. And by the way, you're, as a wetland agency, is probably, you have a very complicated, everything you look at is based on complex kind of concepts that require some knowledge, some expert knowledge. That's why expert testimony is so critical in with wetland agencies, because everything you're reviewing really has a scientific, you have to have, and you're not expected to have the kind of scientific knowledge that an engineer or a soil scientist has. That's why that testimony is so important in a wetland concept, because to determine whether there's an adverse impact on wetlands, you need someone to tell you if there is or there isn't. And again, there may be a battle of experts coming to opposite conclusions. And if they do, then it becomes incumbent on the commission to decide which expert they find to be more compelling and why. So not an easy thing to do from the perspective of an administrative lay board who, as you've all said, most of you don't have necessarily a background, nor, by the way, do I. I mean, I know a lot of this stuff just by attending hearings for the past 43 years. So, and listening, but I'm no expert either.
Attorney Gelderman, this is Angela Jameson for the record. Thank you so much for lots of excellent advice there. That's very helpful indeed. I'd just like to go back to a couple of things. So if we all think about ourselves in our professional capacities, it's very, very rarely that we categorically say with 100% certainty, X is going to happen. Usually what we do is we lay out various scenarios and we assign probabilities to it. So I think it's very hard for engineering experts, soil scientist experts to kind of pound the table and say 100% no impact at all, 100% yes, there would be an adverse impact. And it seems to me that we've got various shades of gray amongst the three sets of experts here. We've got the applicant's experts who have provided a lot of detail, have answered lots of questions, and they come down almost on the side of saying no impact to the wetlands. But as I think it was Mr. Sillo pointed out, they kind of caveat that with if the engineering plan is followed to the letter. Then we've got the interveners experts, which are much more categorical the other way. Yes, there will be adverse impacts. And then we've got the third party peer reviews, which sort of are somewhere in the middle. Well, we have lots of questions, some of which weren't answered, and various concerns. It's tough, it's the war of the conflicting expert testimony. I think Mr. Perkins would like to say something.
George Perkins for the record. I have gone through all of this. Of course, I don't remember all of it, but I did not see any specific reference to what the impact on the wetlands would be. I'm referring specifically to SE Minor and Company. It's on February 27th. They do refer to damage to the wetlands, but and Pete's talking about Attorney Smith's specific areas on appeal that I do not recall, and this is only my recall, but I do not recall, or I have not read anywhere where a specific condition on the impact of the wetlands. For example, in our professional opinion, this will increase the adverse impact to the wetlands in upland areas. And my note on the sign is expand and explain, which wasn't but I don't know if anybody else has noticed this. Thank you.
George, this is Dan. I certainly have noticed it. And if you go through the so-called experts on, I categorized them by pros and cons. And on the con side, it was SE minor. And I really looked hard for numbers or examples or something like that that proved his point. And there weren't any. And I go through Attorney Shapiro, same thing, and Attorney Durkin and Attorney Jeff Stein. Great presentations, but the actual effect on the wetlands, however you want to measure it, I didn't see it. Then you go through the pros, the experts on the pro side, they're the applicant side. Let me turn the page here. You have 6. And I think, Bill Kenny, Joseph Canis, and Michael Klein, even though they were third-party experts, they said basically, with respect to the impact on the wetlands, if all systems work as intended, the impact on the wetlands will be relatively minor. That's Michael Klein. Joseph Canis says commission approve. If the commission approves the application, certain conditions should be considered. They include a robust bonding measure and monitoring requirements. And I'm sure there are others. Michael Klein, and then I turn the page here, and then you have Mr. Dalmas. If everything is constructed according to a design and is properly maintained, there will be no impact on the wetlands. Mr. Solti said the same thing. GZA, Geo Environmental Inc. They said here, the wall was suitable, and we're talking about not the bridge. The wall was suitable to support the driveway for domestic vehicles and fire trucks. Also, it will support the concrete trucks during the construction. The pavement section should be re-evaluated after the first 5 years. The wall should be monitored seasonably for general maintenance. And that was their conclusion, and they had a lot of numbers inside. So I think that they kind of said that the wall is supported sufficiently for these country trucks. You got some numbers on the pro side, and I didn't find any numbers supporting that it was going to have an adverse impact to the wetlands on the con side. So you're right, George. I think you were absolutely right on that. I don't see any money.
So this is Angela James of the record. One of the things I'm struggling with is, what we're not supposed to be doing is grading the experts on their presentation skills. I mean, there were a lot of experts that the applicant brought on board. And, as you would expect, the case of interveners, there weren't so many. But I think you're absolutely right. It's worth we really ought to go through in a lot of detail, Dan, the comments and concerns of the third-party peers, and to try and evaluate whether they have been adequately addressed or not. I mean, the last but one submission from Davison Environmental, so from Michael Klein, is much more detailed than his last report.
Which date is that?
I'm sorry, 24th of February. And, a number of places he says, yes, comment adequately addressed. Well, that is very helpful, and it's good, you know, that it was. But then there are others where it actually talks about the comments still being in place.
Right.
And, you know, it's not clear to me, I mean, we ran out of time with the public hearing, whether those issues were really ever fully addressed by the applicant.
Angela, it's Pete Gelderman again. One thing just for the commission to note is the applicant bears the burden of proving no adverse impact. So just so you understand that, it's the applicant's obligation to prove no likely adverse impact to the wetlands or watercourses. So that's it. That's the starting point. Just wanted everybody to understand that.
Which I'm still coming to the Anthony Sillo for the record. I'm still kind of leaning with Angela here, which is I'm not leaning either way or the other, to be honest. But to Angela's point, there will, like at the end of the day, there will be an impact.
Adverse. It's got to be an adverse
Not
impact.
be our department, right?
It has to be an adverse impact, I think you.
Yeah, an adverse impact. But I mean,
Right.
and again, it might not be our department. Again, with this policy that's in place, it might be more Maria's department, but our experts have said it's not going to be an adverse impact. And unfortunately, and unfortunately, however you want to look at it, that's what we have to go on because that's the expert testimony that we've received. And I think that I take it upon myself. I mean, I wish that I asked the question of if there was a 50-year event in the last 5 years, let's say there were 3 or 4, right? In a 50-year event, how would it impact the wetlands? And I can almost not almost guarantee, but I could bet a good sum of money that they would say it would adversely impact the wetlands. But this commission, me included, didn't ask that question, right? And I think that with what's provided, the material that's provided in the expert analysis, we are where we are with the evidence, and we have to kind of use that evidence. I also think that the site, to your point, Beth, that this system is shoehorned into this site. And I'm almost, and again, this is totally my opinion. We cannot, I don't think we can use, but we can't use this opinion, but I don't think that the site would allow for a 50-year or whatever, a bigger system. So I think that's why this system is as big as it is and can handle what it can handle. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, Beth Sanford for the record. Like Angela, I tend to keep going back to some of the quotes from the expert testimony, and Michael Klein kind of stands out as a very important expert who with our peer review. And I know that we've already read this quote, but as far as the storm management system, what he said is, given the area, the size of the development, the scope of the application, the failure of the storm water network will, it's not may, have a significant adverse impact, the health, safety, and surrounding environment, including the wetland, upland area, and the wetland itself. But he's not saying there's going to be adverse effect in this statement. This is about the storm management system. He's saying, if it does not work, this plan, as we've already said, it will have adverse effect. And that was in the February 24th report. And later in that report, he goes on to say, if the proposed stormwater network does not function per the design intent as outlined above, more water will be getting into the wetland faster, which is I assume not a good thing. But where I think he's more murky in terms of the impact and is regarding the driveway and the retaining wall. And here, so if you look at maybe the second bucket that we started to talk about, from his March 1st report, which he had to do kind of hurrying when he did not appear here personally for that meeting. But he sent out an email or a memo to us. The commission and this is one of the things he said in that report. So this is from March 1st from Michael Klein. The commission and its staff may wish to consider if the response regarding completing the mitigation under the existing driveway permit is acceptable. The confusion regarding the various drawings, their dates and applicability is precisely the situation I was trying to avoid by recommending that a single permit is issued if approved, covering all the activities at the site. I mean, I think what I get out of that statement is that he's not 100% sure they've satisfied the conditions that, that would make us comfortable in appealing it. And then from his previous memo of February 24th, the same Michael Klein, he was commenting, I think this is on page 10. This is again my cut and paste approach. Based on the site inspection, it appears that the surface flows passing through the existing arch culvert on the driveway are now short-circuiting along the base of the retaining wall instead of dispersing in the wetlands in the southeast quadrant of the site. This should be addressed in revised plans. And I'm not sure whether that was. And then he was also talking about the fill that they were going to put in the wetlands near the bridge. The applicant may wish to consider if there are other options that do not require placing additional fill in the wetlands. If this is the best alternative, it is unlikely to cause additional adverse impacts if done carefully under the supervision of a wetland scientist and with stabilization with a wetland seed mix. So again, there's a kind of a lot of what ifs there. So it just seems that some of the issues around the structural integrity and the way it's going to be handled around that very sensitive bridge, which is crossing the wetlands, is something that I don't feel that he came out with a complete black and white recommendation that it's not going to have an impact, but he didn't see that it would.
For the record, this is Angela Jameson. I mean, I think you've, hit the nail on the head, Miss Sanford, in terms of the challenges that we're having in reviewing this testimony, because much of the tone and the subtext of the submissions by the two peer reviewers kind of leaves you thinking, well, this really, isn't going to be good for the wetlands, and there are real issues and questions here still. And it's the other two sets of interveners, of experts that are either, yep, no adverse impact, or yep, there will be adverse impact. And in his submission of 24th of February, Michael Klein, from page 10 onwards, is actually commenting on the intervener's submittal and testimony. And he quotes from S.E. Minor's letter. And then he his comments are, we agree with respect to impacts to the downstream wetlands and watercourses. And that is a comment in relation to S.E. Minor's comment that, as you said, given the area, the size of the development and the scope of the application, the failure of the stormwater network will have a significant adverse impact to the health, safety and surrounding environment, including the wetland upland area and the wetland itself. And Michael Klein says, yeah, we agree with respect to impacts to the downstream wetlands and watercourses. I mean, to me, that sounds like Michael Klein, expert soil scientist, saying, yes, there will be an adverse impact to the downstream wetlands and watercourses.
Well, this is Dan again. I think Anthony hit on something, and you, Angela, that there are, three groups of experts, and Kathleen had a list of experts that she could potentially hire. What was it, 8 or 10 on the list? And Kathleen decided that Canis and Klein would be the best consultants for the job. And, it's common sense that they're not going to side with the pros or the cons. They're going to be third-party objective people. So it seems to me that if we are trying to decide what to do, we should look to what Canis and Klein said, and think in terms of doing what they suggest. That's we almost need to do that to figure out how we're going to end this thing.
Well, this is Angela Jameson for the record. How about this is an idea that we actually go through the more recent submissions by Klein and Canis and, tick them off. Yep. The expert says that the applicant has provided sufficient information. My concern has been addressed. Or no, I still have issues. I still have outstanding questions.
Kathleen Holland, for the record, the only thing I'd just like to say is Joe Canis and Michael Klein leave off at a certain point, and then you still have the an additional set of you could start here. That's a good start, but then there are replies, some of which were given verbally. So the final testimony just, so there was never a final report from Joe Canis and a final report, because the applicant does get the final word. So some of these things may have been rectified, but you have to go back and look at the record.
Those are very good points, and we should certainly take that into account. And we do have in front of us the minutes of the meeting of March 1st.
Right, I went through that.
And the draft meeting of sorry, those are the draft. No, that's we just have March 1st.
You should have both, I thought.
And the February the 27th. Yes, yes. So I mean that should help us.
Just give you some.
Yeah. So
I agree.
So shall we start with the most recent March 1st, Michael Klein? See if we can get through this
Do
relatively.
you think we could, this is George Perkins for the record. Do you think we could take about a 5-minute break?
Well, personally, this is Angela Jameson, the record. I think that's an excellent idea.
We'll be back.
Okay, so
May have some adverse impact, so.
Oh, we're
What if
talking
we
too much
don't?
About the water.
If you don't.
okay, so let's meet back here at 7:05. Okay? Or
5:08. The town has.
Hour off.
oh, you're
the
right,
town, of
you're
course,
right.
is not-
Okay.
No. Taking a break. Yes, I did. No. Well, so sure. Here. What would be like? Yeah. When you cheating, is that what it is?
Yeah.
That's a phone?
Yeah, that's
Oh, I haven't seen probably been-
Yeah.
You take
Take
one,
a couple.
at one time, or just?
Yeah, just one of them. condition of the driveway permit. I'd need to go back and to be 100% certain, but I do not believe that that was a special condition.
Well, I think that the applicant hired his own man to be an inspector, didn't he? Kathleen?
Oh, yeah, there was a site monitor that was the DeAndrea Engineering. So DeAndrea Engineering was, that's typical. They would do
Yeah,
the
That's a site monitor, yeah.
standard. That's standard operating procedure. If you want a third-party reviewer, that's what they're recommending on this.
Right, but the question is whether there was a site monitor under the, when they were putting the driveway in and there was a violation. Was there a site monitor?
So the violation was actually related to further up on the site. It wasn't related to
To the driveway,
crossing.
that is true, yes.
So it
Right,
wasn't related to the crossing. So I'm not sure the timing of when the other
yeah.
material.
But the fact of the matter is a violation occurred and there wasn't a site monitor at that point in time.
At that point, yeah.
This is George Perkins for the record. Given the applicant's track record in terms of violations and presentations to the to this commission, I would strongly agree with the commission that there should be an on-site monitor and it should be independent. And the frequency of the inspection, as Anthony pointed out, you know, that can be worked out. But from what I'm hearing, you know, I think it's absolutely necessary that we have an independent person on site.
Okay, is there anything else that anyone wants to pull out of the Davis Environmental Report of February 24th? I mean, I think the comments that came from SE Minor about the snow melts are very concerning. I mean, the applicant came up with a plan to try to moderate the impact of de-icing by undertaking to use the de-icing agent rather than rock salt. I think that would be an important special condition. But I must say, you know, I'm very struck by SE Minor's comment. The proposed access driveway has no shoulder or snow shelf, and it is inevitable that snow, along with road salt and other pollutants, will be plowed directly into the wetland area, resulting in further damage to the environment and the wetlands.
That is concerning, Andrea. That to me is.
But I would just add that the applicant has said to use a de-icing agent, and I think the acronym is AME. Maybe I got that wrong, but it's there in the record. But all the same, you know, there will be pollution from the cars. Think of all that car oil.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, you could argue there would be car oil if it was a 2 single-family home development, but far less than if you have 93 households and their visitors and all the service vehicles going up and down that driveway. And as SE Minor points out, there will no longer be a shoulder between the actual pavement and the wetlands. Just one other thing I wanted to raise from this report, and that is the extent of the tree removal and, you know, how people are feeling about that.
What page? Are you on?
Well, I'm page 12, but actually it's a note that I wrote, so maybe I got that from somewhere else.
Beth Sanford for the record. In terms of the impact on the wetlands, we have to consider the tree removal, and I think it should be calculated in the storm management system. In the sense that by removing trees, it will affect the flow and of the water, and so that is factored in. So our focus should be on the storm management system rather than what's happening, you know, with the surrounding environment. I mean, because those are inputs, basically, the removal of those trees and the lack of them absorbing is inputs into the calculations of the storm management system. You're nodding your head, Kathleen.
That's correct. Yeah, it's a calculation that the engineer would use in order to design the size of the stormwater system.
So my comment, I think the conclusion is that we should not be directly concerned about the tree removal, but more about its ultimate, as an inland wetlands commission, its ultimate effect on the storm management system.
Okay. Anything else anybody wants to raise from the Davison environmental reports? There's an earlier one, but you know, that was very, well, it wasn't the most preliminary. There was one dated the 13th of December, one dated the 14th of November, but you know, a lot of that was very sort of detailed questions really, and I think those were kind of answered as we went along. If no one else, oh, Mr. Perkins.
Well, I was going to mention, if no one else has anything, I was going to recommend that maybe we come back on the 20th. That gives us enough time to go back and go over these points, and we can conclude the meeting at this point. Or if we can come to a conclusion, I wouldn't mind staying later, but it looks like we do have some more thinking to do.
This is Angela Jameson. I think it will be very hard to actually reach a decision, because actually there needs to be a resolution drafted, and that will take a little time. But I'm not convinced that we've actually kind of gone through everything enough to be at that stage for the resolution to be passed, and for us actually to perhaps take a straw poll. But I mean, we have a regular meeting on the 20th. We have 2 applications, which we absolutely must get through because those applicants have been waiting. I'm kind of personally, I'm of the mindset that it takes us longer to have discussions if we keep breaking them up. But I would have hoped we could at least have got through the Tigan Bond reports this evening. But what do other commission members feel about this?
This is Dan. I'd say cut it off around 9:45, 10 o'clock. If it depends how far we get, but that's my suggestion, really. It's only, what time is it? Not even 9 o'clock. So
It's close to 9 o'clock.
yeah.
I remember the last time that we went beyond, we recapped the next meeting for 1 hour and 15 minutes as opposed to the extra hour that we took. And I don't know. If we want to stay, I'll stay, but.
How do others feel? Do you want to stay, or do you want to pause it here?
What's in the,
Well, the only thing I just want to,
we said we were gonna go over
No,
4
that-
points, right?
you're on a statutory deadline.
Yep.
So the time clock is ticking. You have 35 days to make a decision from the close of the public hearing. The public hearing was closed on March 1st. It's now March 13th. Clearly, you're still deliberating and considering everything. I totally understand that. March 20th, we'll have the two applications on. March 22nd, we kind of put on paper potentially to have a continued discussion. You're getting close, and also, you know, once ideally, Pete and I would have liked to have something in the way of some marching orders from tonight, but it appears that we're not going to quite get there because there'll be a lot of drafting of the resolution that will need to be done. So we need time in which to do that. And if we go to the 20th and then have a meeting on the 22nd, I almost certain I won't be able to get together all the bits and pieces that you're hopefully going to tell us to do.
What is, Beth Sanford, for the record, what is the 35 days? What is that date?
So the actual date, well, your public hearing, your public hearing closed on March 1st. So you have 35 days to finalize your decision, which I think brings you to April 3rd is the drop dead date. Okay.
Does
So
that
you have-
include weekends, that 35 days?
Yes.
That's not,
Well, 31,
Business
32,
days.
34.
and that would take into December.
Beth Sanford, question for Kathleen,
Mhm.
for the presentation on March 1st. We have a Zoom, is it also transcribed like the way this one is being done?
No, I don't believe so. I don't think they've gone that far with the technology just yet on the transcription. So I know that
You
we
can,
don't have one.
you can upload it to YouTube
I
and
can
it will,
find out
in
if
a
they've
private.
done, but
The-
you could also just watch the video.
Well, I'm just saying, what I would like to do is if there are important quotes, I would compile that in for the record. So we can listen
I'll
to it,
check and see
You-
if there's a transcript, but I don't think so, but I'm not certain.
but they can just upload it to YouTube and YouTube will translate it as a private video.
Well, that's certainly an interesting, I think,
I think-
idea, and it would be helpful, but I think we need to make a decision on whether we're carrying on or not, because we're kind of
I think
spending
we stick
time.
around. I think we
Maybe
stick
we
around.
go to this,
Okay,
uh,
anyway.
Around for a few minutes and then we'll figure it out. But we have to get through Ty and Bond.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be that big of a deal because we already know that what our expert says about how difficult it'll be to get a ladder to put in this thing. I don't think that there's going to be too much more here, George. I don't want to, trust me.
We can move it along. that's
We're
fine.
gonna push it along.
Okay.
You're starting on page 9 of. Ty and
You
Bob's
go ahead.
report.
You can make,
Front
yeah,
part is
I
just
would.
the
Yep.
documentation.
George is gonna
Okay.
make a quick telephone call.
Quick call, be right back.
Okay, well, we'll press on, George, in the interest of time. Okay, so turning to the report of February 27th, Tig and Bond, starts on page 9. So the first set of comments deal with roadside safety. And Mr. Canis notes on page 10, we note that roadway safety comments did not directly impact the wetlands. And he notes, though, that, you know, the applicant might have to come back if there were complications about putting the guardrails in.
I think that what did he say about the guardrail system?
It's
I mean, not again,
it's not going into the wetlands, I don't
Right.
believe.
yeah, it was
No.
anchored to the side of the wall,
Mhm.
right?
Yep.
And his whole thing was, how are we gonna traipse through the wetlands to install it? But, I mean,
Remember it was being a big deal, but
they didn't say it was a big deal, but
But Beth Sanford, for the record, the way I've read that, where it's been mentioned multiple times, is that I don't think we should concern ourselves with it because if they're going to do that, it would require them to come back to us. That's what he said.
Yeah. Okay, well then, moving on, the second set of comments, site grading.
We're on page
I'm page 11.
11.
Page 11.
So A and B comment addressed,
Safety fence.
same with C. Then we're back to stormwater management.
Kind of goes into that Maria thing again.
Yeah,
And that's all engineering.
Yeah, which is engineering.
and I assume something that planning and zoning will deal with in relation to whether or not what's proposed is in compliance with
Yeah.
the drainage policy, and if not, whether it matters.
Yeah.
Okay. Hydraulic conductivity tests were performed, comment addressed
So on page 11.
13.
at 12 and 13. I think if you see at the top of page 13, his comment at the bottom of point 2, that says providing another layer of conservancy in the computations. Do you think he means conservativeness?
Where are you? I'm sorry. Oh, conservancy.
Yeah.
Conservativeness is what you think? Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's more.
So in other words, it's making it more conservative,
conservative.
which is a beneficial thing. Correct. And then detention system, plan modification requested.
Those have all been addressed.
Yep. And I mean, I think there was discussion of the overlap and that the applicant didn't have a problem with that.
Mhm.
So a lot of comments addressed. Page 15, number 4, comment outstanding. Yep, this is the question of using a ladder over the wall.
I have a note on that that says it needs to be clarified, that we must have said he needed to clarify it for us. I mean, it's in my hand, no,
Mhm.
Yeah.
assuming that's what that meant. Because the ladder wasn't very good idea.
Beth Sanford for the record. This will be in the video
Yeah.
Correct.
because he
The March 1st.
he addressed it in his presentation.
Mhm.
And I think the question was answered. I mean, it seemed
Yeah.
like fairly innocuous to me and that it wasn't going to be an issue.
In addition, if you have the maintenance agreement, which the town engineer recommended as well, as the applicant agreed to it. And our peer reviewers recommended the maintenance agreements of all stormwater that could be included in the maintenance agreement.
Right.
Okay, well, the next, there's some comments addressed and then more information needed towards the bottom of page 15.
This is a note, I think we should put in, and if they do this ladder over the wall thing, we should do it where I think the commission has done in the past, approve it as a by hand.
Mm-hmm.
I know it's like by ladder, they already said that, but like by hand, like no machinery goes down in that area to lift stuff up, only from the top, something of that nature. I know we can specify on it more, but I know even past things that I've done before I was on the commission, we've always said, we're gonna do it by hand, and that means strictly
Mm-hmm.
by hand. I don't think that's a hard thing to follow.
No heavy machinery is what you're after.
Yeah,
Or no machinery, period.
yeah, I mean, yeah,
Hand tools.
yeah, hand tools. We've approved stuff like
Leaf
that.
blower. Yeah, sometimes you
Yeah.
do that.
My favorite.
Generator.
So the bottom of page 15, this is something that, I see mine are brought up. So good to see what the third party peer reviewer had to say. And this is that, groundwater will pass through the ungrouted base of the proposed stone retaining wall. And our concern is that water passing through the wall short circuits the water quality volume treatment that would be achieved by infiltration. Do we feel that that was adequately addressed? I mean, it was picked up in that the last meeting that we had.
The only thing I have to say about that, Anthony Silva, is that I think it was adequate after they described what they were going to do. So right now the water is on one side of the wall and it's clearly not seeping through the access way or bridge or whatever we're calling it, right? But once they do the excavation in between those boulders to put in the material that they say they're going to put in, then technically this should work.
I would probably also just direct you to look at all the GZA reports that came in.
Yeah.
There was
Yeah.
something that came in over the weekend, and I, maybe take another look at that report to see how that wound up.
Middle of page 16, more information needed about the liners again. I think that was all addressed.
Yeah, that was the overlapping.
Yeah.
That didn't seem-
They resolved that.
This is George Perkins for the record. If you go to top of page 16, it says we have not seen the results of the analysis. So I don't know if they're waiting for information.
Probably the GZA reports that came in last weekend. Or 2 weekends ago. They were electronically submitted, so you'll have them in the folders online. Same thing with C, the GZA report.
Let's see here. We went over the garage doors and the sanitary sewer thing, right?
Yeah. And actually, page 19, Mr. Kennis towards the bottom says, the application proposes a swale. In lieu of a swale, a berm would also be acceptable.
So either or.
Yeah. Page 21, towards the top of the generator. Mr. Kennis says that we believe that the above approach is acceptable, but it would be preferable to have a remote monitoring system for the interstitial space between the tank walls instead of relying on weekly monitoring of the tank. Is that something that might be a special condition?
I would think so, just because our,
Mm-hmm.
then we're back to snow.
Yep, it's calcium magnesium acetate.
We all
CMA,
use on sidewalks and
yeah.
so it doesn't, rock salt eats its stuff, right? Calcium does not. So you do it on a lot of like concrete sidewalks and stuff like that, which is what you would use if you don't want to use rock salt.
Those little-
Yeah,
they
like little
want
pellets.
pebbles,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
pellet Sort of,
Yeah,
this must be what they use in our condominium.
That's exactly what they use.
I mean, this is Angela James. I would just note that our expert says they have less vegetative impact. Less. Does not say it has no vegetative impact.
What page are you on?
Page 22. I find at the bottom of page 22, new comments. Number 2, how is the area required for snow storage determined? I mean, that's a good question. How do we know that 50 parking spaces is correct amount?
Is that a wetland matter? then?
Well, only to the extent that you get snow accumulating elsewhere or gets dumped elsewhere.
Mhm.
You know, what do you do? You've filled up your 15 parking spaces, those that are available. You are the guy that is actually having to shovel the snow to collect it. What do you do with it? I know what you do with it. You toss it over the side
Well, Anthony did.
Or
make
you
it-
haul it away.
Yeah.
or you haul it away.
Which
Yeah,
is
we do.
what they
Yep.
do. And again, the only reason why I say is because I happen to have the business that does snow removal. And what you do is, when you run out of space, you literally get a machine to load it into trucks and take it off site. Right? So that's why, I mean, if they do have a certain amount allotted, I would imagine that he asked, Ty and Bond had in his report to ask the question, because the grading of the parking lot, right, should be the way these parking lots, the new parking lots are designed now because of these meetings, is the grade of the parking lot should go to a storm drain,
Yeah.
right? That would be which also would run into the separator, right? I'm hoping that they put it there for that reason. I'm sure it has something to do with going to a certain storm drain.
Okay, I think February 27th was the last report we had from Tiger Bond. That correct? Yep.
Except for his testimony.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Sanford, Kathleen, I have a question. I guess it would be Joe that would do this. They didn't create a calculation of the volume and flow themselves.
No, they're not required to. They're only reviewing calculations that have been provided. That's their role. They don't do the design, just like our town engineer wouldn't do the design.
Mm.
They're verifying the numbers.
And Beth Sanford, to my a point on that is, Joe says the numbers are conservative.
I don't think that's a bad thing. in
I
the-
think conservative means they're underestimating it. They threw that,
I didn't take it that way.
he
I
said they,
took it as over, I took it as they're good numbers.
he said they threw out the low ones and took the high. No, they threw out the high ones and kept the low ones. I thought that meant, I asked him
Mhm.
what conservative meant. So I'm gonna have to go back and listen to what his answer was.
He did say there were certain numbers that were discarded because of
Mhm.
the way they were.
Right.
But
Yeah. I
something to
think-
probably look
what
back
is-
in the tape,
Mhm.
you know?
Mhm.
Just because if there are dictating, you know, putting numbers in a certain way to make it work, and
Okay, other aspects of the expert testimony, either peer reviewers, the interveners, experts, or the applicants that people want to go over? Or issues that think we haven't addressed. We had our 4 buckets. We talked about the stormwater management system. We talked about the driveway and the retaining wall and the bridge. You know, I just have on the bridge, I just have a question. Well, actually, so the system in the driveway isn't working quite as anticipated, right? So you're getting water flowing where it shouldn't, and that will have to be remediated. But why did that happen?
Because the project's not finished. That's
Mm.
first problem.
Yeah.
They're at a certain point. They have
Mm.
not done their wetland mitigation planting on the,
Mhm.
that was associated with the actual crossing that had been approved previously. The remaining top isn't finished. All the infrastructure isn't quite in yet. So it's really just a matter of the point in time that they're at with the project right now. That was explained on the record by the applicant.
Right. Third bucket was the impact of rock crushing. Are there areas there that anybody wants to talk further about?
I don't wanna undermine it, and I don't really know, again, I don't know much about I'm not an air quality scientist or anything, but they do have, I would say, also depending on the excavation company that does do this, there are a lot of rock crushing, you know, operations on many construction sites, close to here, not close to here. Almost, you know, a lot of construction, especially commercial construction sites, do have them. I would assume, you know, again, assuming is probably not the best word to use, but these big excavation companies that are hired for these jobs have a lot of mitigation, right? Like they have a lot of, lack of better terms, water spraying, you know, things to keep dust down, right? Certain things like that. I don't see. And again, I could be wrong, but I think that if it's properly monitored by a professional excavation company and by a professional monitor, I can't see there being that much of an impact. Again, that's kind of pulled out of thin air, but I can't see there being that much of an impact considering that this isn't the only place that they're rock crushing in the state, right?
I will say they did mention, when they were talking about their rock crushing, and I thought that the applicant did a good job explaining that process. They talked about inspections as being visual inspections, and I did wonder if there's, again, another condition of, to put in sort of, to your point, Anthony, air quality, because I'm imagining that
Right.
air quality becoming filled with dust that settles in the wetlands.
Public health.
Their inspections
I think
were
what-
visual, that they noted.
Yeah, Kathleen was just mentioning, I mean, again, unfortunately, we're concerned about it, but it's not within the wetlands purview, right?
Mhm.
No, I mean dust in the air settling in the wetlands, and I not something that I would. I thought their rock crushing plan made sense, but I was wondering if the inspection could be extended beyond visual to. Are there more mechanics than just visual inspection to see if dust is having an impact?
I'm sure we can ask right, Kathleen, we can ask our on-site
Mhm.
person
Right.
if they could if there's a way to test for it, if they could look for it. I mean, again, there has to be some sort of a way, I would imagine. But that might be that might be a criteria for that certain special inspector, right?
Beth Sanford for the record. My conclusion in going through the materials this weekend was that none of our experts, or neither of our experts, were concerned about the dust having an impact on the wetlands. They called it a robust dust mitigation plan, and that, this happens in many places. So that was not high on my list of concerns.
Mhm.
But just to add, that's what our job is going to be individually, to go through and make sure that that's what you heard or you read from the experts.
This is Angela Jameson. It sounds to me as though we all still need to go back and do some more homework, some more digging, some more thinking about this. But are there any other areas that you feel that we should discuss this evening? Would this be an appropriate time to maybe take a straw poll about where you're minded to go on this application? And then maybe to ask Pete to finally to say a few words about the difference in the two decisions that we have to reach. One on the application and then one on the intervention. But let's first, before we go to Pete, let's first see if anybody wants to raise anything else this evening. And if not, go to a straw poll. I mean, this is only a straw poll. You could change your mind between now and our next meeting, which is scheduled for the 20th of March, and that has been known to happen. So really just where your head is at right now after the discussion that we've had. Who'd like to start?
Well, I started last time, so I'll start again. This is George. Right now, I am leaning slightly toward it, but with a lot of reservations and considerations that have to be worked in. And it's by no means a final type of thing, but I think there's a number of considerations that we will have to take into account.
Thank you, George. Who'd like to go next? Dan, are you saying something? We can't hear you,
You're
Dan,
muted
sorry.
again. You can see there. No, you're not. You're good.
Can't hear you, Dan.
Now you just muted yourself again. Now you're not. Now you are. I'll unmute him.
Or we could just go to somebody else first.
Dan, hit your button one more time. There you go.
Can you hear me?
Yes, success.
I still have the position I had at the beginning of this conversation. I feel that we're doing the right thing. We're looking at the two peer group people that we hired and retained and our objective people, and we're doing the right thing. And I said at the beginning, I'm leaning towards approving it with stringent, radical conditions, really. And I haven't changed my decision yet. No.
Okay. Who's next? Estelle.
That's Sanford. I actually would rather withhold now, because I think it's important to kind of do another lap of the testimony, and particularly the in-person last testimony we had.
Yes, me, right? Or Priscilla?
You can go.
I just think that like Dan said, I mean, I'm still on the fence. I do think that we still have a full session to go through and get this figured out. I think that there is going to be some, if this is approved, there are going to be some serious regulation. And I'm not taking it lightly. I do think, again, like I said in the beginning of the meeting, I think that the plan and the engineering of this whole thing is a true engineering feat. I think that some of it is, we're gonna have to rely on Maria. So I'm throwing in your lap, Maria, if you ever hear this. But I do think that regulation on, you know, snow, regulation on upkeep, regulation on installation, regulation on the bonding that we talked about. There's going to be a nice list of stuff that people are going to have to abide by. And I don't think that they would be opposed to it, but I think it has to, like Dan said, it's going to be very, very, very strict. With probably multiple oversight employees, if you will, to make sure this all works out.
Priscilla?
Yeah, this is so hard. Because the applicant gave us a lot of good expert testimony. And far more than I think than the interveners did. The things that the interveners came up with are really good questions and good reasons not to approve it, but they didn't have a lot of expert testimony backup. So there's, I mean, part of me has all these questions that they still had, but if I have to strictly go by what these people that sat here and these told us, then I might have to approve it with lots of reservations or restrictions or considerations.
Special conditions.
Well, we haven't
Special
finished yet. Katie's next.
I'm in a similar position, which is leaning towards approving it with a lot of restrictions, and I'm very conflicted because it's hard for me to imagine that this project, the final existence of it, as well as the building of it, is not going to impact the wetlands, and yet I don't see any proof of that provided in the expert testimony that has been submitted to us. So I'm struggling with that. You know, obviously we have to follow the guidelines and the purview of this commission. So that's where I stand.
So I guess I'm up next. This is Angela Jameson, and this is a tough one because we have got different views from different experts. Excuse me, different levels of detail, different amounts of money probably spent in coming up with the expert testimony, and I just have had a real hard time thinking that these wetlands are going to survive in the form that they currently are, both through the construction of this very complex multifamily development, which in a very sophisticated and complicated engineering process that has to go just like clockwork. But in addition to that, you know, once 93 different households are living there, that actually those wetlands will stay, you know, untouched. I mean, we've seen what's happened to the edge of those wetlands that back onto Hill Street and Urban Street, and that isn't down to the applicant. You know, though that erosion of the wetlands there has occurred over many years, long before the applicant actually bought this property. So, I mean, it's a question of which set of experts do you believe do you go with? And at this point in time, I am in the camp of believing that the interveners, experts, have put together a sufficient case for adverse impact occurring to the wetlands, such that I don't see that the applicant is meeting the burden of proof. And as our town attorney has pointed out, the burden of proof is on the applicant. That said, you know, everyone here has raised a lot of good questions, and I certainly feel like I need to go back and review what's been put in the record, as well as reviewing replaying the videos. So, you know, this is just a straw vote, a straw poll, and it's people expressing their point of view at this point in time. Can I just raise a question? Do we really think, as on timing here, do we really think we're going to be able to have a very substantive, lengthy discussion on the 20th?
Or the 22nd.
Or the 22nd?
Well, you should just then determine the 22nd would be your next meeting to discuss this.
Well,
That's reasonable.
or maybe we should return to this at the regular meeting, and then also
Have the 22nd.
at the 22nd.
However,
I mean, it doesn't seem to me, but you tell me, Kathleen, as
Well-
though we've given you and Pete enough to go on.
That's why I think, like, to be honest, I would like to just do the 20. I know it's a lot for next week, but I think we should I don't think we're gonna have time for both in one spot. Do you? Do you think we should do the 20th and 22nd, or should?
I think we should do both. That's my opinion.
Unfortunately, as much time as this has taken, this commission and all the people involved,
We have 2 applications though.
and that's what I'm saying. We have 2 applications, and I trust me. I would rather do it in one. I just don't think we're gonna do it.
but I mean, so what typically happens next is if you were at a point where you wanted Pete and I to try to draft a resolution based on the majority consensus at the moment, or preliminary consensus, that's what we would do.
So I would,
Or try to do based on comments you made this evening and special conditions, and, you know, we put all the meeting details in and whatnot. But it sounds to me like maybe you're not there.
so I don't think that that's a horrible idea, and this is up to the rest of us as well. But maybe we could use that as I still think that we meet both times, but we use your and Pete's work on the 20th. We need some sort of starting point, right? And I think by putting it on paper, like you just said, Kathleen, might give us a thing to something to discuss more in detail, and keep us a little bit more I don't want to say on track, but keep us a little bit more like, this is what we're trying to decide on a few different things, and then we'll be able to talk about those points.
Well, but just based on, I'm only going by the straw vote.
Mhm,
It was more towards approval, some undecided,
mhm,
and one in the camp of not approving.
mhm. That's
So
my
that's what
sentiment.
that's where
Mhm.
my tally of things here.
Kathleen, this is Dan. I would draft something, a page or whatever it is. I would draft something if I was you. At least you got to start. And it seems to me that it's a good start.
It's
But-
not a start. I mean, I would say it's not a start to an approval by any means. I think it's a start.
What I'm saying, an outline of a draft, and that's a page. That shouldn't take that long, I don't think.
Well, Dan, sorry to interrupt, but
It's
this is
not-
Angela. I really don't think it'll be just a page, and I think it's quite a lot of work. I would also say that by starting to have something that is few pages with special conditions, we're kind of already along the road really towards approving it.
Right.
I mean, and maybe
Well, then-
that's
then
where,
we-
maybe
then-
that's where the commission is going to come
Well, then
out.
we should.
Then why did we go
Then we
through this thing right now in the last 15 minutes? Why'd you ask the questions then? Why
No, I
did
don't
you
think
want
that-
to
I don't
know
think-
how we were going?
I think there's a few things that Beth would like to look at. There's a few things that Angela would like to look at. There's a few
Okay,
things
all
like
right.
in video to reassure. But I think that I say we just do the 20th and the 22nd and just be done.
Did you say the 22nd or the 27th?
Both 20th and
22nd.
22nd,
Second.
Two. Okay, good.
Monday and a Wednesday.
Yeah, is it, okay, we continued discussing this on the 20th. Does that give you enough time, Kathleen, to
Between
draft things
the
for
20th
22nd?
and the 22nd, I seriously doubt it, but I need direction. I don't know what type of, both Pete and I will need direction as to
Mhm.
which road are we going down?
Right.
And if
Okay.
you're asking, if you're discussed all the special conditions, to me, that's an approval
Right.
with special conditions. And I think also if you don't want to get too deep into actual resolution, as you're reviewing and continuing your review, and if you think of a special condition that you would like to add that maybe wasn't necessarily in the record from a peer reviewer, put it down on paper so it could be discussed. And then, you know, Angela and Beth, I guess, you know, you guys are still figuring things out. So, you know, Angela's, thought right now takes this in a whole different direction. So, and there's other things that would be necessary if that's the route that ultimately the rest of you go. For denial.
I mean, if the majority of the commission wants to, believes that the right thing to do is to approve it, then obviously that is what is going to happen. But I think that decision needs to be taken mindfully and very deliberatively, and make it clear. Otherwise, it seems to me that it's a, you know, a slow slide towards, yes, we're approving. I mean, either you're approving, each of us are going to approve it, or we're not going to approve it, and we have to be prepared to say which it is and why.
Why?
I mean,
Beth Sanford here. I think to me, the main issue, and I would say I would suspect I'm not the only one in this camp, but to adhere to the directive, which is that we need to provide substantial evidence that there's going to be negative impact to the wetlands and watercourse. And I think we need to, I feel for myself, as I want to, after this discussion, go through the record, including the most recent testimony by the expert and by the applicant, that to see if, you know, there's evidence of substantial evidence. And that might also bring a few of the members of the commission who may be somewhat on the fence if we
That's why
Feel
I
like
think the
it-
20th is a good time to review, and then we'll have a tidy meeting on the 20th. Going back to,
We may have to push out the March 22nd through to the following week.
should we get a
order.
date in our calendars just in case for the following week?
Well, March 20th, obviously that's your regular meeting on March 22nd. And also just, while I'm thinking of it, March 16th, we have a site visit.
right,
Do I have a head count for March 16th?
Yeah, people
Yes.
raise your hands, you can go.
which is on Thursday.
Yeah.
This Thursday,
I have it in the
1,
calendar
2,
yet.
I have it on my calendar.
4,
At
5.
8 a.m., right? Not 7:30.
right? And Katie, I think is away still. So,
Correct, I'm away.
okay.
Katie, why don't you take us with you, Katie? I was not very considerate. All right, so Thursday, we said?
The site
This Thursday?
visit, yes,
For the site visit.
two locations to go to. I just wanted to confirm because I don't know if you were gonna sit it out and go on your own, because that would be a quorum if I had the quorum.
So would-
Yeah, well, I'm going to try to make it. Depends a little bit.
It's 8 o'clock, right?
8 o'clock.
16.
Okay, so should we tentatively put a date in the following week, starting March 27th?
The
the
We're gonna
Monday.
have to. Well, okay.
I mean, maybe we're not going to need it, but let's get it in the calendar now so that we all know.
This will be for the two applicants or for this
No,
To
no,
the
no.
final resolution.
Final resolution.
final
Vote.
resolution?
Vote. how's the 28th look? Evening of the 28th? Sorry?
I'm sorry, we have
To
some,
be out of the
let's,
country.
let's find some, we might have some conflicts. George?
What are we talking about now?
That, we're gonna be leaving, for about 10 days.
Okay,
And the 31st
We're
is
gonna be
the,
going-
is the date, right?
I'm going to
about the
Europe.
3rd, but that's a
Excited to be out of
Monday.
the Country as well.
When are you leaving?
not going
Lisa?
together.
No.
No, we're not.
Which week?
We don't want any gossip.
We
both
leave
going-
on the 23rd
Oh, boy,
and we don't get back
That's the
till
problem.
April 4th,
you're gonna have to,
which is,
We leave on the.
that's our deadline.
I'm sorry?
that's a problem, because now you're getting down to
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You got 5.
But then the night before, you're just gonna, you know.
So we
panic and,
I'm sorry?
I say we just try to really dedicate to this one.
Yeah,
Well,
but
we have
the
two
problem,
applications.
the problem is that there needs to be resolutions drafted. And Kathleen and Pete need time. If we were to indicate firmly the direction we're moving in tonight, but without taking a final vote, then they can get to work. And they can share something with us on the 20th, or we run out of time on the 20th, or we don't like the special conditions, or we think of other things, whatever. We can finalize it on the 22nd, but it seems to me, and please, folks, tell me if you disagree, and Dan, really want to hear what you think. It seems to me that we better be a bit more definitive this evening. What do you think, Dan?
Well, it's 4-2. I mean, we could go to 3-3. We may need 2 resolutions. You know what I'm saying? Next time.
Well, I don't know. Is it really, is it 4-2? That's,
Yeah.
so
Or
I,
is it 5-2?
I would put it in the camp of, well, Beth didn't say, so, I mean, Angela is in the deny category. That's, George is probably leaning to yes, Dan Stepanek, yes, Anthony Sillo, yes, Priscilla
Katie, yes.
and Katie, yes. So that's kind of 5 leaning in the direction of approving versus 1 leaning in the direction of denying it. And then Beth, I don't know if you want to express a view now, Beth.
I'm just reading the notes from the
Yeah.
testimony that I want to revisit. That's
Yeah.
kind of my holdout, which is, I think it's important. So I'm reading the minutes from.
Okay, but I mean, okay, so even if Beth were to end up in the let's deny it camp, that's still 5-2.
Hmm.
So sounds to me
Yeah.
like we're moving in the direction of approving this with
No.
special conditions.
Kathleen, let me ask you this question. Once we are definitive, how long will it take you and Pete to put it together, do you think? Are you talking 3 hours? You're talking 2 days, or what are we talking about?
The whole thing,
The
the whole thing is, Dan, I
I
think that,
think-
yeah,
yeah,
commission
Kat-
members aren't gonna be here after the 20th,
22nd.
the 22nd.
I just want to know how much time it's going to take
I would say
Pete and
couple days.
Kathy.
I
to
think
put the thing-
Kathleen should answer that question,
That I did. I want Kathleen to answer it.
but everybody else is answering it for her.
Because
Yeah.
it's going to take a considerable amount of time, Dan, just to.
I don't
pull-
know what that means. What do you think it means?
I'm working up to an answer. What do you want to hear? It will take a considerable amount of time to get all of the details and the resolution pulled together. And this, if you're going in the direction of the 5-2
Mhm.
polling right now, that means pulling all the special conditions that you talked about tonight and putting them into the record. Yeah, it does take some time. I could, try to have something for the 20th. I mean, that was the goal. If you were able to give us direction this evening, we were gonna put the nose to the grindstone and get it done so that you'd have at least a draft resolution for March 20th with potential additional discussion to March 22nd. But you need to take your time that you need to make the decision. So
Yeah,
Right.
but that said, Kathleen, we lose 2
that's
commission
not
members,
good, yeah.
which is not good. My suggestion is that we go around the table again, and we're a little firmer in where we say we're coming out, and so that Kathleen and Pete have enough direction to draft something, and we can add to it. We talk about it on the 20th after we've done the other 2 applications, and we can say, well, there are additional special conditions or whatever, or we don't think it's this one is quite stringent enough, and we still have time to do that and then vote on the.
Can I say, having drafted a lot of these resolutions in the past, and I don't want to put Kathleen on the spot here, but I think between the 2 of us, we can have a resolution to be able to, a draft to be able to submit to the commission by the end of the week. The end of this week, which is what, the 17th? So that the commission will have the weekend to take a look at it, dissect it, determine if it really says what everybody wants it to say. Perhaps then everybody can go through the record, make additions or deletions or suggestions, and then it can be discussed on the 20th. And between the 20th and the 22nd, we would then be able to, I think, draft a final resolution that meets at least the approval of the majority of the commission. So I think we can have something to the commission in basic form, subject to everybody's review and comment by Friday. And then it would be incumbent on the commission, unfortunately, to spend some time over the weekend to take a look at it, go through the record on their own and see if we've hit everything that should be hit, missed something that should be included. Then on the 20th, we have that further discussion and finalize it for a vote on the 22nd. But I don't want to put I don't want to, I don't know what Kathleen's schedule is.
We'll work together. I mean,
Yeah.
I just need clear direction.
Well, I think in a way we have it, and I don't think we need final direction. I think we need a direction that we've been given by the commission that's probably sufficient for us to draft a preliminary. Remember, it's preliminary, so it's, there are going to be things in this draft resolution that some members of the commission will say, I don't want to include that, but I do want to include this. And then we have an opportunity to finalize it, the next 2 days. So, but I do think we have enough, at least input, to come back with a suggested resolution that that the commission will have an opportunity to review and modify as it deems fit. But so if that works for everybody, I think we can do that.
Okay, Kathleen, are you okay with that? Anybody want to object to that way of proceeding? Pete thinks that we provided sufficient direction. Nobody, everybody can rethink this, look at it again, change their minds, whatever. This is only preliminary views.
Correct.
So I think this is really the only way for us to really get through to the end of this in time. And given that it's important that as many commission members who've been part of this discussion are able to vote. One further question. Pete, can you very briefly, really briefly, describe the difference between the 2 different decisions that we have to make, but really briefly?
Yeah, I'll be very brief. The difference is when in the wetland concept, it's negative impact or adverse impact on wetlands and water courses. With respect to the intervention, it's whether any of the activity will unreasonably impair the public trust in the water. I can read exactly what it says. Whether the activity is reasonably likely to have the effect of unreasonably polluting, impairing, or destroying the public trust in the air, water, or other natural resources of the state. So that gets that's a little broader, obviously, than limiting it to wetlands and watercourses. However, the consideration you have is within your role as a wetland and watercourse agency. The standard is the same. There has to be substantial evidence. So, and again, let me just say this. Generally speaking, anybody can file an intervention petition. And oftentimes an intervention petition is filed by someone who would not otherwise have standing to bring an appeal. Being an intervener gives someone the standing to bring and to file an appeal to raise environmental issues only. But here you have some of your interveners who are probably statutorily aggrieved. The burden is on anybody who takes an appeal to prove that. But if any of the interveners are abutters, for example, they don't need to be interveners to be able to file an appeal. They have that right anyway. So I guess that's kind of one way of saying, interveners still have to have proven to you through substantial evidence that the activity that's being proposed, which is this project, is reasonably likely to have the effect of unreasonably polluting, impairing, blah, blah, public trust. So, and again, you need to make that finding. The effect of that is not going to be, it's not going to deprive somebody of the right to be a party to an appeal, since the interveners are, at least one of the interveners I know would be statutorily aggrieved, but it's still a finding that has to be made. So it's strictly again, what's the standard of, the standard of review is the substantial evidence rule. And again, by the way, the feasible and prudent alternative obligation is in the intervention statute as well. So if the commission finds that there is that the activity is reasonably likely to have the effect of unreasonably polluting, then the commission can suggest a feasible and prudent alternative that would not do that. So, but again, it's based on substantial evidence. It's based on the record. You could find that the interveners established that there will be a unreasonable pollution of the public trust in the air, water, and other natural resources, but that would probably be inconsistent if you find that substantial evidence supports an approval. So typically there's a correlation between the two.
Understood.
Thank you. So, and does anybody want to talk about anything else? If not, may I hear a motion to adjourn? Oh, excuse me, Priscilla.
20th is our regular meeting.
Yes,
Do we want to move it to 6 o'clock?
I believe we are doing it at 6 already, on the 20th.
We weren't, but that's a good idea. We've been falling into the six.
Yeah.
Okay.
6.
It's okay.
I think that's a good idea, because we've got a lot to discuss.
But have
And-
you published, is there a public hearing that night?
No.
I don't know what's on the agenda, but if there's a public hearing and you've already published notice,
Colleen said there's no public hearing that night.
there's no public hearing. Okay, then you can make it 6 o'clock.
Special
Okay,
notice.
good. I think that's a very good suggestion. Everybody okay with that? 6 p.m. start on the 20th, and then it's I think our site visit is at 8 a.m. on the 16th. Thank you.
Correct.
Okay, does somebody want to make a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Good, all those in favor? Aye.
Hey,
Thank you very much, everybody.
thank you.